businesses and hardworking Georgians need relief from the increased cost of doing business, having car insurance, or getting access to health care. I believe this package accomplishes those goals and strikes the right balance.
Governor Brian Kemp reveals the details of his highly anticipated tort reform package. Good evening and welcome to Lawmakers on this legislative day 9. I'm Donna Lowry in Atlanta. At a press conference today, the governor said Georgians need tort reform and they need it now. We'll have more on his plan to overhaul the civil liability system in Georgia coming up. The legislation to make girls' sports in Georgia for girls only is on the move in the Senate. On the show, we'll hear from a couple of people who testified, one of the bill's sponsors, and another lawmaker who says the legislation will harm vulnerable people. We're also talking education tonight and on everything from pre-K through college and workforce development with two legislators who join us in the studio. But first, let's go to the Capitol where our Sarah Callis has today's news.
Hi, Donna. Today at the Capitol, Governor Kemp revealed his much-anticipated top legislative priority.
The big news of the day was the unveiling of Governor Kemp's tort reform legislation package. The legislation, which will be carried by Senator John F. Kennedy, lays out rules for civil lawsuit proceedings. The goal is to limit lawsuits and curb rising insurance costs and legal fees for businesses and consumers. Specific proposals include blocking foreign adversaries from funding lawsuits, limiting when a business can be sued for injuries that happen on their property, allowing juries to consider if someone was wearing a seatbelt in car accidents, and banning outsized jury awards.
And our businesses and hardworking Georgians need relief from the increased cost of doing business, having car insurance, or getting access to health care. I believe this package accomplishes those goals and strikes the right balance. It achieves meaningful tort reform this session as opposed to a second one later this year.
Kemp says that the legislation could protect small businesses and that if it does not pass this year, he will call a special session to address the issue later this year. But several Democrats have already stated their opposition to the legislation.
A plaintiff is a Georgian who has been harmed. A plaintiff is somebody who has suffered catastrophic harm in many cases. And today, what the governor was saying was, when we're talking about these plaintiffs, what they have suffered, what these Georgians have suffered, does not mean as much because the insurance industry now has complained.
Also today, House Democrats laid out their legislative priorities, including fully funding public schools, gun safety, and Medicaid expansion.
House Democrats have a different vision for Georgia, one where working families have a chance to get ahead, not just get by. Georgia Democrats believe that everyone deserves the freedom to thrive by building communities that prioritize access to health care, education, and economic opportunity. As Democrats, our top priority is to ensure that all Georgians, as the leader said, have what they need to live, learn, and earn.
In the House, members observed a moment of silence for the victims of a tragic plane crash in Washington, D.C.
To join me in praying for these souls lost in this devastating incident and for the families who now face unimaginable grief. To those members of our Assembly, including our Speaker who are in Washington, D.C., we're grateful for your safe return last night. Please be with all our nation's transportation partners that move our loved ones around this globe. We pray for them as safety of its passengers is paramount for their mission.
And in the Senate, Senator Elena Parent took a moment during her point of personal privilege to point out what she called hypocrisy by President Trump after he signed the Laken-Riley bill in Washington, claiming to be cracking down on crime while also pardoning the January 6th Capitol protesters.
I'm not buying it that Trump cares about crime or about protecting Americans. If he did, he would not be selectively punishing crimes that fit his political narrative while excusing violent offenders when they serve his personal interests. That is not justice. That is manipulation.
The Senate then called it a day. And put on your fashionable black dress or your best suit, as this year's debutantes and beaux make their annual visit to the Capitol. The event gives, quote, the next generation of leaders from DeKalb, Rockdale, Henry, and Newton County students an opportunity to witness the legislative process and engage with legislators. This year is the first time that the young men have been included.
Also today, a controversial bill that bans transgender girls from middle school, high school, and college female sports passed out of committee. Lawmakers reconvene on Monday for Legislative Day 10. That's all for my Capitol Report. Back to you, Donna.
Thank you, Sarah. Once again, the issue of transgender athletes in girls' sports is heating up at the Capitol. Today, the Senate Education and Youth Committee held a hearing on whether to ban transgender girls from playing in girls' sports. Let's hear from a couple of speakers on both sides of the issue, including a pediatrician. First, Katie Blankenship, a former student in Woodstock, now in college, describes swimming with a transgender athlete.
I distinctly remember our first Saturday practice. This was 5:30 in the morning, and we were doing a swim set of 2050s off the block. And we were trying to go as fast as we could, and nobody was really in shape. It was just coming back from the summer season. And this male athlete, after not swimming for an entire year due to being on hormone blockers and hormone therapy and whatnot, was essentially going our records in practice and beating our best female athletes that we've had that have had gone to NCAA, scored at conference, scored at our ODAC championships, and they were essentially obliterating our records in practice.
This bill and others like it seek not only to exclude transgender students from the benefits of school sports, but really to exclude them from society in general. Would you want your identity to be effectively banned? And when kids feel excluded and outcast, they fall into depression and they often commit suicide.
Well, joining us to talk about the legislation is Democratic Senator Kimberly Jackson of Stone Mountain, and we're so glad you're here. Welcome to Lawmakers again. Always glad to have you. So what are your thoughts on what they said? And let's begin with the young woman from Woodstock who's now in college.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. And I would have to begin by just saying I'm sad that we're having this conversation once again. We know from really highly reported statistics that every time we bring legislation to bear that has an anti-trans sentiment to it, that it brings children danger, that it puts children in danger who are identifying this way. So I'm sorry that we're here. But I will say, I hear that young woman's story, and I want to acknowledge that we want girls to be able to play sports and to feel like they're competitive. And we have to make spaces that are also safe for trans girls as well. And I think we can get there. This legislation just doesn't take us there.
And the pediatrician addressed those issues that can be harmful for them. Talk about that.
That's right. And I think the pediatrician does a really good job, and we don't hear that in the clip, but saying there's nothing about being a trans girl that makes you inherently more depressed or more likely to commit suicide. It's these types of conversations where we try to erase trans children, where we exclude them from sports, where we don't make space for them, where we make definitions about sex that don't include them. That's what makes them vulnerable to episodes of depression and ultimately suicide. And so, that's why I stand against these types of bills, because I am very much interested in protecting kids and in saving lives.
Now, we're going to talk more about a bill you have, too. But I also spoke to Senator Clint Dixon of Beaufort, one of the 29 senators who signed this bill.
At Georgia Tech, there was an incident, it's been a few years ago, where you had a male that was competing as a male, and he was middle of the road, I think ranking, middle of the pack, and actually claimed that he was transgender and was transitioning to a female and was on hormone therapy for that, but had not had any of the actual physical surgeries, just suppressing testosterone for several months, and was allowed to compete against females and actually beat all the females in several different categories, which is very alarming, because typically in any sports you've got specialty. So in swimming, you've got your your marathon swimmers that swim 400 meters, and then you've got your dash, just like in running, you've got 50-meter swim, and typically the training for that, one athlete would not be competing across the board. They would be focused on one of those events, and then this male just crushed all of those different categories. And then there's also been issues recorded at high schools across the state where males have been participating in female sports, and it's problematic, in several different reasons. Injury can come to females, because males are, biologically stronger, they're bigger, faster, and also simply just the fairness of the game. Females have fought for, equality across many different things, in our society, this being one of them, and we don't need to let that be torn apart because you've got males trying to compete in female sports.
So you think you have more support?
Oh yes, I do. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a common sense issue. I understand, the transgender community, which makes up about 1% of the population. They've got their concerns, but simply put, we've got to protect females. I mean, like I said, there have been issues throughout, our history, with females not being, equally, being able to participate in sports and, for pay and to be able to vote and all these things, and they fought for their rights for so many years. And then you've got folks that are, in a lot of cases, are claiming to be transgender to compete in these other sports, and females could be hurt, they could be injured, and also, they could lose out on college scholarships and many other things. So I think it's imperative that we protect it.
Okay. Senator Dixon, your comment on what Senator Dixon had to say.
Yeah, a couple of things. The incident that continues to be referred to that happened at Georgia Tech, and the NAACP has actually taken that on. I'm sorry, the NCAA has taken that on and addressed those rules. So that incident would not happen again today, because they understood that, sure, women don't want to be in the locker room with someone whose body doesn't match their same body. And so they've implemented some changes. There are some additional time periods that you have to be on hormones. So a lot of things have already changed through the NCAA rules that we don't need to be passing legislation about. But I want to pick up on this piece about protecting girls or protecting girls when it comes to sports, females for sports. If we really want to protect girls and make sure that there's equality in sports, there's some real things that we can address. I have girls right now who are having to get up at 5 a.m. to practice soccer because the field is reserved for the boys after school. So every morning, they're waking up early. The boys never have to wake up early. I have coaches in my district today who coach girls sports who make significantly less money for coaching girls sports than the ones who coach boys sports. That's what equality, if we really want to bring equality to girls sports, we need to make sure that people have access to quality playing fields, no matter, and have shared schedules. I have girls who get 6 balls for an entire season for soccer. That's all they get. That's what the school gives them. And the boys get as many balls as they need. So that, if we really want to bring equality, if we want to protect girls' sports, let's talk about a real issue where there are real girls involved. Because what's true today is that we don't have transgender children in high school trying to all of a sudden be transgender and want to play so that they can win all the scholarships. There's no evidence of that happening. But there is evidence of coaches not being paid equally.
Okay, I know one of the ways you want to make some changes is your own bill. So you have SB 41. Tell us about it.
Yeah, so that's exactly what SB 41 does. It tries to bring some real equality to girls' sports. It says that if you pay boys coaches a certain amount, then you need to pay girls coaches that certain amount. You have to share the playing fields equally so that no one is having to get up at 5:30 in the morning every single time. It says that you have to provide equal amounts of equipment to both sides. These are common sense. They keep talking about this is common sense. We shouldn't let trans kids play. This is true common sense. Black and white equity. It's right on the paper. Same pay, same amount of provisions, same opportunities to play on the fields. And I would also argue that we need to make sure that we have the same quality level of coaching. For girls' teams, it's often the parent who finally raises their hand and says, oh, okay, I'll do it. And they know nothing about the sport. But for our boys' teams, across middle schools and high schools, they have top-rated coaching. And so that's why you find girls wanting to actually play on boys' teams, not because the boys are stronger, faster, and better, but because the coaching quality, the equipment, the opportunities for advancement are so much better for boys' sports.
And we're not just talking about with some of the things you're talking about, elementary and middle school and high school. We're talking at college and the WNBA, women's soccer, all of that is still looking for equality.
That's right. This is an issue across the board. So, Donna, I played sports. I played on the United States national team. I have spent a lot of time.
What did you play? Soccer?
I played team handball.
Okay.
I've spent a lot of time playing sports and thinking about this issue. And some of the same issues that I faced in middle school when it came to equality, the things that made me really mad, they're still happening. Boys having access to state-of-the-art weightlifting rooms while girls get a few dumbbells in the corner. That's happening not just in our middle schools, but it goes all the way to the professional level. And I'm so excited that we've seen some equality begin to come to our professional sports, but that same type of equality and intentionality needs to trickle on down to our high schools and middle schools.
Okay, well, we'll follow your bill, and certainly we're going to follow this issue. And I know you have a press conference on Monday, so we'll hear more about it. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Well, coming up, a closer look at why education funding has the biggest chunk of the state's budget. Our next guests will offer a glimpse into bills to help navigate education from pre-K through college. This is Lawmakers on GPB.
Dedicated to preserving Georgia agriculture. Farm Bureau advocates for all Georgia farmers at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
It's good to have everyone back together.
Good news indeed.
Put your feet up a minute.
It's beautiful.
How does that sound to you, man?
It's what I love doing. Cup of tea.
I was thinking more of double whiskey.
Freshly baked biscuits, always.
Well, this is all proving rather cozy, isn't it?
Understanding the past gives a sense of the future. This is the first time that anyone has seen this in 2,000 years.
This is amazing.
Well, I'm excited now.
Pompeii is a battle against time.
You think I'm joking, but look at this. It did really happen.
Don't let anybody tell you who you are.
History teaches us to honor the past.
When you look back, you're like, wow, that was pretty special.
This is something that's actually altering the course of history.
You're charged with keeping these stories alive.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry. We're going to talk education now. And joining us is the House Chairman of Higher Education, Republican Representative Chuck Martin of Alpharetta. Also here, the Senate Minority Caucus Chair, Democratic Senator Elena Parent. Welcome to Lawmakers to both of you.
Thank you.
I appreciate you being here. So let's start with the youngest learners, the little ones. Childcare is expensive. The costs keep rising. And I know you served on a study committee that looked at childcare. What were some of the key points?
That's right, Donna. It's actually not just a Georgia problem. It's a national problem. And that's essentially, as you alluded to, because of the fact that the economics of it simply don't work that well. It's very expensive for families, even when the workers themselves really aren't getting quality pay or benefits, and then there's high turnover. And that has a very significant economic cost to our economy if people are trying to come up with unorthodox or unlicensed care. Also, that would set us back in terms of having our youngest learners ready for formal schooling. We know that about 90% of a child's brain is neural pathways are actually developed by age 5. So if you don't have that enriching environment when you're really young, and if you're in a unlicensed or not quality situation, it is going to be really hard for Georgia's school system to ever try to catch you up. And then there's the economic cost. So whether you're looking at it from the perspective of we want to get our learners ready, this will help us in K-12, or whether it's just we need moms and dads to be able to go to work now, right? It matters.
So what did the study committee recommend? And any legislation coming out of that?
There are so many recommendations in there, Donna. And what's going to be interesting to see, is how many actually enter the more formal discussion. We have the Child and Parent Services Program, which is a joint federal and state funding program. The governor had put a significant amount of federal funds from COVID relief dollars into that, and we were serving, I think, about 50,000 families, but now we're coming way back down. So putting more money back into CAPS is one of the proposals. There have been some novel ideas floated about maybe doing some tax incentives or other encouragements for businesses, more businesses to have daycare on site or be contributing to a child care center for their employees. That's certainly another idea that could theoretically have legs. And then one very novel idea that Representative Martin and I have discussed before and certainly would need vetting is this notion of maybe following the lead of New Mexico and utilizing a portion of our $12 billion-ish undesignated surplus to make a child care trust fund that would then be generational. And the money that it kicked off year after year, not spending that principal, would then be put into the budget for yearly appropriation for the purpose of early care and learning.
So we're talking about the surplus that the state has, and then sort of like a rainy day fund. You would like to see it some money put in there. What do you think about it?
Well, we had a great conversation, the senator and I did, along with some others that day. What worries me about that is typically when you do that's a bit like Social Security. You know, you put it out there and it plans to do this, but if the returns aren't there, or if somebody needs that money in the future, they pull it out and it doesn't do what it's meant to do. I would prefer to work on a solution that is operational today and can be operational tomorrow, along with what the senator suggested. I would suggest and agree that getting the companies involved and working with the federal government to make it tax advantageous for a company to have a daycare on site. Let them make sure that is a business expense that could be written off from a federal tax situation, but not be taxable to the family. Okay. There's ways we can do these sorts of things, working with our federal partners, working with the states, and working with our business and employers that remove government from touching the money, because every time government touches money, we have to take a little bit of it to administer. And I believe when you work with the federal government, if you develop a tax advantageous thing for a company to host it, number one, moms and dads like to know their kids are taken care of. So if they're at the building, they're working. I just am convinced that's a better opportunity than having to drop them and then go to work. So there's ways we can do this. I would prefer to work on something that we could see operationally work from year to year, as opposed to put some money in there and hope the return, kept up with the demand later on.
Okay. Any response to that? No?
Well, the figures that are being floated are based on the historical returns of the teachers' retirement system. Certainly, we do know that there will be, there could be changes year to year, but then your appropriation would have to be made from what it kicked off.
Particularly that system, in addition to everything else we put in it, is requiring another extra $115 million to be placed in it this year because it's not earning what it needs to do to keep the promises.
But I will say that is different, because that's a retirement system versus right now we're not funding any of these families.
No, I understand.
So anything you do would be a benefit.
No, I understand. And I would just, again, I would prefer to work on it and take the situation head on and not put money over and count on somebody else to honor promises that the senator and I, may make as a legislature this year. I think we ought to honor those promises, and we ought to put a sustainable model in place. If we can do that, working with the state, working with our federal partners, we certainly should try to do that. And working with the chamber and our employers to have everybody on board.
The Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce has long been very concerned about this issue, and as a matter of fact, funded a study a number of years ago that, and I'm sure it's gone up now, demonstrated an $8 billion loss to Georgia's economy due to child care challenges.
Okay, I know that we don't have any legislation now, but when you guys have something, you come back to talk about it. Let's move on up a little bit. And I know one of the other things you are you care about is dual enrollment.
Yes.
Worrying about the kids not getting enough out of that, not fully utilizing what exists.
Yes, you've got a good match on tonight,
yeah.
Donna, because Representative Chairman Martin and I have also worked on this issue together. Yes, I mean, it seems very smart to me to utilize the dual enrollment in a way, program and administer it in a way that is set up to meet Georgia's workforce needs. And we have been trying over the past few years to align those things better. I really got interested in this idea when I started learning more about the apprenticeship models that they have in Switzerland and looking at kind of like our dropout rates here in America and thinking if we could have more kids getting a skill and still have it be permeable the way it is over there. So you go on to 4-year college, go on to 2-year, whatever it is. I think it could have just tremendous benefits for our economy. And Georgia is, I don't mean to set out the notion that we got nothing or that none of it's any good. It's just, it's very complicated and we need more, I think, private businesses to be providing those opportunities. And, you know, for an issue that Chairman Martin has worked on for students from first-gen or lower-income families, and I know he's going to speak to this, paying for college can be truly prohibitive, right? And so that's another reason that I think dual enrollment has a very important role to play. And we do know that we need something like 65% of students to have some sort of post-secondary training to keep up with workforce demand.
And getting them involved in high school with this dual enrollment while they're in college, for people that don't understand, they're in college and in high school at the same time. I know it's been successful, but you also want to make sure that even that there are kids who get needs-based financial aid, get what they need, that the right students are a part of that.
I think what you're talking about is this year it's House Bill 38,
right.
and we're trying to extend the sunset, and basically we call it the college completion grant. It's kids that have exhausted their financial ability to finish college, and it allows them to get up to $2,500. They don't have to get it all at once to complete their college course. It could be a 2-year degree, it could be a 4-year degree, it could be a certification that moves them forward, a stackable certificate. And it is not based on merit in terms of you don't have to qualify for it meritoriously, but I would say that if you're that close to finishing your degree, you very much merit the investment that Georgia would be making into you up to $2,500. So far, over the 2 years, we have 93% of the course hours taken have been passed. Right. These kids are serious. I say kids, these students are serious about finishing. They've put their shoulder to the wheel. They have an end in mind, and this it's $10 million a year we've put. The bill this year will actually lower the threshold and make it more available to 2-year certificate holders or 2-year degree holders. At 45%, if you're 45% complete, you'd be eligible. 70% if you're a 4-year person to finish your degree. And just, I'm going to get the numbers wrong, but there were 6,900 awards out of that $10 million in the first year to 6,000 students. And a vast majority of those are completing and crossing the finish line, and they're going to be productive parts of our economy. And it's just been great to see how the students have been involved in it, how the financial aid offices at the colleges, at our university system, technical college system, and our private partners have worked together to do that. So we're doing some great things. We're pointing that, as the senator said, toward industry, toward the medical field, the USG, I should say. I'm a UGA graduate. Sometimes I confuse those. But the USG system has really done a good job in focusing toward medical needs. And I think Georgia's moving forward, focusing our time and treasure in the right direction to educate these students.
So you talked about 6,000 students. How many more if your bill passes?
Well, the same amount of money is available. What we'll see is the 2-year, primarily the 2-year colleges, degrees will have access to it. for more so now. And then we would hope that we will continue to get Good Day. We're pushing the sunset at 4 more years, and we would hope that as we see this is a good investment, that we'll put more money into that, because we know it's tough to graduate, but what's even tougher is when you don't graduate and you have college debt.
Because of the money, yeah. Well, I appreciate you both being here. Lots of great ideas, and we'll have you back to talk about some more.
You bet.
Thank you.
Well, that does it for Lawmakers today. We'll be back on Monday when we'll talk all things AI and what it means to Georgia. Have a good night.